All right. I used 8 minutes for that. Hey, can you reset my timer for me, please? That'd be great. And I'm telling you, if I start to smell cats, there's a high chance I'll just be like, hey, we're done. Just let's go. Okay. I'm like, wherever we are in this sucker, we're done. On that note, let me just say that for those of you who maybe are newer to City North, if you've never been around for one of our birthday parties before, we like to just celebrate. We like to have a good time. We like to enjoy this. We like to try to look back at what God has done, and we like to look forward to what we believe God is calling us to. But along with that, we also like to throw a party because it's a birthday. And so the reason why we hire a food truck and why we've got there should be a big bubble party going on, foam party outside for the kids afterwards, or I guess the adults too. I mean, you're more than welcome to go play in the foam. But the reason why we do that is just to celebrate. We think celebrating together is important. And so whether this is your very first week or whether you've been here a handful of times or whether this is your home, I want you to know that everything afterward today, it's for you. Please feel free to stick around. Please feel free to enjoy the food. Everything is free. It's 100% free. We already paid for it. It's done. So if you enjoy barbecue, stick around, have some barbecue. Even if you don't enjoy barbecue, stick around. It's a great chance to get to know some people in our church and just have a good time together. So there's no end on it. So feel free to stick around as long as you want, head out, but it is for all of us. So all of that said, we are starting a brand new message series today called One Another. And the reason why we're doing this series and what this series is all about is interesting. And it's interesting because of what's led us to this point. Now, some of you have been around, you've heard the story of City North, some of you have not. I'm going to give the Cliff's Notes version because there's some content that we've got to cover today. And the Cliff's Notes is this. I grew up in the church. I've been in church my whole life. I actually grew up in Sunbury. I went to a church in New Albany. My mom, who played keyboard this morning, and my dad, who has passed, they were incredible Christian people who raised my sister and I to love the Lord. They showed us what it looks like to serve Jesus, and I watched them serve their local church and give their lives to their local church. And you know, this is in the days of Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night church, and I could probably count on one hand the number of services that I missed in my entire life. We were involved. We were active. My dad was on the board. He was a Sunday school teacher. He sang in the choir. My mom was the pianist. She was the treasurer. They did all kind of stuff. It's the world I grew up in. All I knew was church. And I loved it. Like I truly loved it. Well, as I got older, God put a call on my heart to go into ministry. And so I pursued a degree in youth ministry at Mount Vernon Nazarene University. I grew up Nazarene, and so it made sense to go to MVNU. My parents are alums, and it made sense to go there, and so I did, and I got a degree in youth ministry and went out on my own and started my job as a youth pastor at 22 and, you know, believing I was going to change the world, and it was a tough first job. I moved to a church. It was in West Virginia where my wife is from, actually her hometown, and I grew up in suburban Columbus, so moving to West Virginia was some culture shock. I didn't understand them. They didn't understand me. There was just friction. It did not work well. I was there for about 3 years and eventually moved on and moved to Kentucky, which you maybe feel like a lateral move in terms of fit. Or if you're from West Virginia, you'd see it as a downward move. If you're from Kentucky, you'd see it as an upward move. So just kind of, you know, it's all perspective. But it was very much an exciting move for me because the church that I moved to Kentucky to be a part of was pastored by one of my very best friends in the world. We had been talking for years about working together and dreaming about what it would look like to one day be able to serve the Lord together in ministry and how we were going to make a difference in our denomination. And I mean, like the biggest dreams you can imagine. And so to land a job there at 25 was, I can't tell you how excited I was. I thought I was set for life. But unfortunately, that dream came crashing down hard about 2.5 years later when, very much out of the blue, my best friend fired me with a 4-month-old daughter at home. And for the first time in my life, I experienced brokenness at the hands of a church. Now, I was never blind to the fact that churches can wound people. To be clear, my parents didn't totally hide that from me. But I had never experienced wounds like I experienced in that season. I haven't told this story in a while. I'm getting emotional. I loved the kids in my youth group there. They were my kids. I mean, I had a 4-month-old daughter. My daughter, Brooklyn, was 4 months old then. And I had my own kid, but they were my kids. I loved them with all that I was. I loved the people in that church. In fact, I loved it so much that even after being fired, I tried to go back. I went 3 times. And I'll never forget the third time that I went. It was a Sunday morning. I was sitting there and I was a mess. And I remember the pastor, my friend, getting up and preaching. And the message was all about how they were for people. And all I can remember is sitting there thinking, well, you weren't for me. And I knew that day I'd never go back. I couldn't. My heart couldn't handle it. Well, I was wounded enough that I began to pursue a career, and I shouldn't say a career, I began to look for jobs in other fields. The problem is I have a Christian education degree, and that's not super marketable. It's like I couldn't even get an interview at Lowe's. Like nothing was happening. Eventually, I went to a temp agency, which to be really honest, I didn't know temp agencies were a thing. That wasn't the world I grew up in. I went to a temp agency and got a job on a factory line making weather stripping for cars, and God used that to humble me something fierce. And through that process, God began to do some work in my heart, and I made a commitment to him that if he would let me do what I love again, that I would do things differently. And he did. He found it in his heart to let me serve in a church again. Eventually, another pastor in town called me, and I started helping him out, and that turned into a part-time job and then a full-time job, and it was incredible. But about 5 months into that full-time job, God began to do something else. And it just started as like a stirring in my soul. I knew he wanted me to do something, but I didn't know what it was. And again, very long story, very, very short. God called me home to start a church, which was never on my radar. I had no interest in being a senior pastor or lead pastor. None. I didn't need to be in charge. I didn't really want to be in charge. I like teenagers. I like playing games. I like eating pizza. That was fun. But God said, I want you to go home and I want you to start a church. And I want you to start a church for people who are like you. People who have been hurt and broken by church. Because you never gave up hope, but a lot of them have. And so I begrudgingly obeyed. When I moved from here, I intended to never come back. I didn't like Sunbury. I didn't want to come back to Sunbury. I loved my parents. I didn't really want to be close to my parents. As it turned out, God moved us into their home for 17 and a half months while we waited for our house in Kentucky to sell, while we had 2 little babies. My wife knows the number of days, like the number of days, and maybe the number of hours that we lived there. But it was incredible. It turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to us. And in the midst of it, we planned and we prepared and we pursued and we launched City North Church on September 18th of 2016 out of Genoa Middle School in Westerville. And the amount of hope and enthusiasm and joy that surrounded it would be hard to describe. But it came crashing down pretty quick. Because planting a church is without a doubt the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. I'm raising 3 kids, and I would have 3 more kids. We're not having 3 more kids. Where's my wife? We're not. I don't know where she was. She's out there. We're not having more children. But I would raise 3 more kids before I'd try to plant another church. It's been the hardest thing I've ever done. It's been the hardest thing we've ever done. For those who've been around since the beginning, there's still a handful of people who were here with us in the pre-launch season. And after service, there's, if you may or may not have seen it as you came in, but there's a timeline out there and there's photos all the way from back pre-launch till now. And there's a handful of folks that are still a part of our church that are in some of those pre-launch pictures. They would tell you this has been unbearably difficult. We went through a really hard season. The first 3 years of the church, I successfully grew City North Church from 48 to 47 to 41, which is another hit to ego. Another way God began to humble me and began to work on the ways that there was still some pride in my heart. And all through that journey, I just remember thinking like, God, I know you're working on my heart, but like at some point, can you just cut us a break? And then COVID happened in 2020. And we did the opposite of what every other church that I know of did. We doubled in size. We doubled 2.5 times our giving in the middle of COVID. And I couldn't explain it. People would ask me, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't have any idea. Nothing. I have no clue. We have these cool wristbands that people wear with colors. I don't know. But God blessed us unbelievably during COVID. And we thought, all right, we're turning a corner, like things are really changing. And we shot up and we went from being a church that averaged about 45 to being a church that averaged a little bit over 100 in the span of like 18 months. It was awesome. It was incredible. It was so exciting. It was so encouraging. And for all of us that had been on the inside, it was like, finally. And then about 18 months ago, things started changing again, but the opposite direction. And the last 18 months have been the hardest 18 months of my life, bar none, 100%. They've been the hardest for my family, for my wife. I'm going to tell little bits of this story that some of you know and some of you don't. And I've debated on if I even should, but it has so much to do with where we're going as a church. In the last 18 months, my wife and I have lost the 5 families that we were closest with. My wife has lost her 5 closest friends. I've lost my 6 closest friends. And every one of them has been a situation where I didn't know it was coming until the decisions were made. There were no conversations with us. We didn't know there were problems. And one after another, after another, after another, our friends said, we don't want to do this with you anymore. And it has ravaged our souls. I haven't shared about it because, what do you do as a pastor? You get up here and say, the people leaving hurt my feelings. It's not a great look. But the reality is where we've been over the last 18 months has profoundly shaped what I think God has called us to. Because at the end of the day, as I look back, what I see is that there was a lot of unhealth. And there were a lot of things that at the time I didn't realize how significant they were. Because from the very beginning, the heart of this church, my heart, what God asked me to do, what God asked my family to do, was to help hurting people. That was it. It was to help hurting people. But as we helped hurting people, what happened that we didn't see is the hurting people didn't actually get healthier. And in the end, all their hurts turned back on us. And so what God has done in my heart over the last 18 months is he has solidified in me a realization that the way we've done things cannot be the way we continue to do things. That the way we've operated cannot be the way that we are continuing to operate. It can't be what we do moving forward because hurt people hurt people. It's just what happens. And while we've done, I think, a very good job of meeting people where they are, what we have not done a good job is saying, now, it's time to go to Jesus. It's time to let the work of the Holy Spirit transform you from the inside out. No more excuses. It's time to start getting healthy with the Lord. So this series, One Another, it brings us to today. Because what's been so fascinating to me is that over the last 18 months, I shared a little bit of some of the pain points that we've experienced. But at the same time, what's happened is that God has shown up in some unbelievably huge ways over the last 18 months. He has shown up in ways that very, very specifically and very, very firmly have communicated to me, hey, this all is chaotic and this all is getting all the pain and all the stuff. It's all happening, but I'm not done with this story. Keep going. I've had some of you reach out to me and say, hey, are you doing okay? I'm worried about you. And I've tried, yeah, I am. Because the Lord has made it clear that he's not done with this. That he's not done with our church, that he's not done with me, that he's not. But the question is, what does it look like? Because it can't look like what it looked like. And what the Lord has shown me, what the Lord has shown our new elders, what the Lord has shown our direction, what he has consistently shown many of you as you've come to me and shared thoughts and things, is that it's time to become a healthy body. It's time to become a healthy body. So what this series is all about, this series, One Another, I've looked through all the one another passages in the New Testament. And I've taken them and I've pulled out 11 different themes. And over the next 11 weeks, we're going to walk one by one. Because throughout the New Testament, there's all these one another commands, these one another instructions. And those instructions are specifically geared at how the people of God are supposed to relate to one another. That's the point. That's the goal. And so what we're going to do as a church is we're just going to walk one by one through them. And there's going to be moments where I probably say some really hard things to you that when I do, by the way, I'm saying to me as well, because I'm not different than you all. I'm one of you. We are one another together. But I'm going to call our church to some different things than what we've experienced. Because what's brought us here can't be where we go from here. And so today, we kick that journey off. And today we're kicking that journey off with the most important foundational thing there is. And this matters so much because at the end of the day, the reality is church is hard. It's hard. And it's hard because it's people. And people are hard. And I like all of you, like a lot. I don't know some of you, but I like you. Hopefully you all like me relatively well. You might like my wife better than me, and that's fair. She is better than me. You might like my kids better than me, that's not fair. They're still getting there. Love you, B. But we're all one another. Church is hard. It's hard because of people. One of the most powerful and profound things about the church, though, is that when the church gets the one another's right, it becomes the most unbelievable witness to the power of the resurrected Christ that exists, maybe the most powerful. And it's that way because in no arena of life do people who have so many differences and who see so many things differently and who have so many different backgrounds and different stories, nowhere else do people who are so different, are they able to be together when they are following Jesus correctly. When they're doing the one another's right, all of a sudden there's this thing that binds us all together and people don't understand, like, well, how are you all so tight? Like, it seems weird because it shouldn't be possible because nowhere else in our world does it exist. And so that's what one another is all about. It's about how to be a healthy church family. Now, one more bit of context before I dive into today. This is especially important to me, not just because of what I've been through, but because of the witness and character of my parents in my life. I remember when I was a teenager, there were some things that I didn't like about our home church. There were some things that I had grown disenfranchised with. And I had started attending another church, going to their youth group on Thursday nights when my church didn't have anything, because their church had a youth band, a teen band. And I had started playing guitar, and I was like, well, I'm going to go there and play in their band. And I had some friends over there, and my parents, they were great with it. But what happened is I started to see the green grass on that side of the fence and go, we should leave our church and we should go to that church. And I approached my parents about it and made what I thought was a pretty compelling argument, a pretty compelling case. I knew there were things they were frustrated with. I knew there were things they didn't love about our church. I knew there were issues that they had had at times with the pastor. And it's not because they ran their mouths about things. It's because they didn't hide what church is from me. And I remember sitting there and begging my parents. And I remember them looking at me and saying, this is our home. This is our family. We are not leaving. We will not leave. We will figure out how to work through things because this is our family. And that conversation profoundly impacted me throughout my life. It shaped fundamentally how I see our church as a pastor. When I talk about church being family, I mean family. I don't mean just like people who get together on Sundays and then don't. I mean I see you all as my family. But as you know, families are also a challenge. Church is hard and families are hard. Well, families are hard for the same reason churches are hard, because families are full of people. And in any family, no matter how close the family is, there's going to be some differences and there's going to be some disagreements. And just like in the family of God, it is crucial that people learn how to navigate those things in a way that is healthy and productive. And in the case of the church, that honors Christ. So, let's get to it. One another. Over the next 11 weeks, we are going to explore very specifically what it looks like to be a healthy church family. Now, I'm going to read through some verses here. I'm going to read more than is in your message notes, to be clear, because there was just too much. I couldn't fit it all. So I've got some expanded passages. I think it all is on the screen, but I am going to move quickly for two reasons. One, as soon as I get into this, some of you are going to be like, we just talked about this. We did. We talked about this same thing 3 weeks ago, maybe 4, I don't know. Very recently. I did a whole sermon on it. So I'm going to cover part of it, but very quickly, and I'm going to reference you back to that as well. Also, because again, cats is outside, okay? So we're going to get through this. Here we go. The very first, this is the most foundational one another that exists. We're going to start in Colossians chapter 3. Colossians is a letter written by the Apostle Paul to the church in Colossae. It's to the church. It's to people figuring out how to do life together. This is what Paul says. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with, and then he gives a list. Clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with one another. There's a one another. Bear with each other, and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. That's all really good stuff that I'm not touching this week because we've got 10 more weeks. And some of the other one another's are in there. But what I want you to see is that what Paul does here is he lists out all these different ways that the church, that the people of God should approach and behave toward one another. And then he says this, and over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. In other words, there are a lot of really important ways that we should be treating one another. There are a lot of really important behaviors we should be engaging in our relationships. But at the end of the day, there is something that kind of glues it all together, that makes it all work. Or maybe I could say it this way, without which none of the rest of it will actually do what it should do. And that is love. Love is the foundation. Love is the foundation. No church, no group of people, period, can be healthy without an understanding of and a commitment to loving one another. This is what Paul is getting at here. Now, I could have pulled a bunch of different verses on this, but I'm just going to hit a couple more. In the book of 1 Peter, Peter, who was Jesus' closest follower, the one that he had the tightest relationship with, Peter says this, above all. These are final instructions. Above all, I've written all this stuff to you, but most importantly, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. That's a confusing verse. There's not consensus in biblical scholarship on exactly what it means, and it's not the point of today, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. But most scholars, and I think I'm compelled by this case, most scholars think that what Paul is getting at is when you truly love someone, you're willing to let a lot of things go that otherwise might bother you. You're willing to let little offense, you're willing to see that person and give them the benefit of the doubt and not allow everything they do that with that person that drives you crazy, like everything they do gets under your skin, right? When you really love someone, truly love someone the way that the disciples understood it and the way that Paul understood it, the way Jesus taught it, you just don't let all the little things bug you so much. You just kind of smooth them over. That's the most compelling case to me. There's some other thoughts on what that might mean, but that's where I kind of land on it. So again, Peter says above all, the most important thing, love one another deeply. Because when you love one another deeply, you don't let little things get to you. And then John chapter 13. Now again, 3 weeks ago, I preached on loving each other and that is critical in a healthy church body. And I preached from John 15. Well, the beginning of John 15 actually starts all the way back in John 13. Jesus begins this long monologue, this long teaching way back in John 13. And as he opens the teaching, he says this, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. So even for Jesus, understand that when Jesus gives these words, when he speaks these words, he's sitting around a table with his disciples, giving them instructions about what they're supposed to do because he's about to be arrested and killed. This is, in the most literal sense, his commissioning of the first church. And he's saying, I'm giving you a new command. And it's not actually new in some ways because Jesus had already taught them to love their neighbors. But now what Jesus is doing is he's going, I'm establishing a new body, and within that new body, within that new group of people, within this new church, you must love one another in the same way that I've loved you. You must. It's critical. You must love one another. This is the foundation of absolutely everything. And so what's the point? The point is that a healthy church family loves one another. I'm not going to try to fancy it up and make it memorable and it's that. A healthy church family loves one another. If they don't love one another, they can't be healthy. I would argue that if they don't love one another, they can't even really be a church family. Because Jesus' instruction was you must love one another. This is absolutely the foundation of everything. But it raises a question. And it's a question that, again, we dealt with in large part a couple weeks ago. What does that mean? What does it mean to love one another? And now I'm not going to repeat, hopefully, hardly anything that I said a few weeks ago. And so if you weren't here and you'd like to hear that message, it is online. It is it's a part of the Christian-ish series. I don't remember, honestly, what the title of the message was called. But you can find it on there, on our website or on YouTube. It was the third part of the series, for whatever it's worth. I'm going to try not to repeat anything. But what I want to do is I want to look at this through the lens of what we just read Jesus saying in John 13, when he said, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, that's critical. As I have loved you, you must love one another. I want to look at that a little bit more deeply. And again, I'm going to move pretty quick through this at this point. Just before those words, at the beginning of John chapter 13, this is what John, who, by the way, John was one of Jesus' disciples. So John was sitting in the room when what we're about to read happened. This is what John records. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and to go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Now, John often talks in circular ways like this that can be a little bit confusing. But what John is saying is Jesus demonstrated love throughout his whole life, and now as the hour was drawing near for him to depart, he didn't change one iota. He kept doing what he had done. And then John records a fascinating story that some of you might be familiar with. And I want you to, again, keep in mind as we read through what happened next, that John is framing this all through what it means for Jesus to love the ones he loved. Does that make sense? So, here's what John records. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So, he got up from the meal. He took off his outer clothing. He wrapped a towel around his waist. And after that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Pause. This is already a pretty incredible story if you understand some of the cultural background. But we're not going to do all the cultural background right now. Instead, again, we're just going to focus on John frames this story through the lens of Jesus loved his people. And in his final instructions, his final monologue that he's giving to his disciples before he goes to the cross, he precedes that monologue about love by washing their feet. In other words, what Jesus is doing in this moment is very purposefully showing them what love looks like practically. And you might go, well, he's washing their feet. Like, what does that really have to do with anything? Judas was at the table. Judas was at the table. The one who had already sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. The one who had already decided that he was going to betray him. The one who was the reason why Jesus was about to be arrested and crucified. Judas was at the table that day. And when Jesus got up and when he took off his garments and when he began to wash his disciples' feet, it makes all the sense in the world that Jesus would have washed the feet of 11 of those men. But it makes no sense that Jesus would have washed the feet of Judas. None. But that's where the power of the story is. Jesus did for Judas what he should not have done. Jesus showed Judas a kindness and a compassion that he did not deserve. Now, the disciples don't really understand what's going on. In fact, he comes to Simon Peter, who we just read Peter's words. Jesus gets to Simon Peter, and Simon says to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Which makes me laugh, because I don't know what order Simon was in the chain, what order Peter was in the chain. But at this point, yeah, man, that's whatever. Yeah. Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." I'm going to come back to that in a moment. "No," Peter said, "you shall never wash my feet." But Jesus answered, "Look, unless I wash you, you have no part with me." And then Peter does his typical Peter thing and kind of goes from 0 to 60. "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." And then Jesus answered in a riddle, "Those who have a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body's clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you." So remember just a moment ago when I said I was going to come back to Jesus saying, "You don't understand what I'm doing, but you will." This is where Jesus starts to pull back the cloak. Hey, there's one of you around this table that isn't clean. And then John gives an aside, for Jesus knew who was going to betray him. And that was why he said not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and he returned to his place. And now he starts to pull the cloak back even more. "Do you understand what I've done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for it's what I am. But now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you that no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. And now that you know all these things, you will be blessed if you do them." So Jesus is emphasizing action. He's emphasizing action that results from a posture of caring for the people. Now, at this point, Jesus has not given away who is going to betray him. He's not given away who is unclean. But I can imagine the disciples sitting around the table are like, "Hold on, Jesus. Can we go back to what you said a moment ago about one of us not being clean?" But to Jesus, that's not the critical point. The critical point now is what Jesus is saying is, look, I've shown you what it looks like. I left the throne of heaven. You guys believe that I'm the Son of God. I'm the Messiah. I left the throne of heaven and came to earth, and I've washed your stinky, smelly feet. And I've not only washed your feet, I've washed the feet of the one who is going to betray me right before he's going to betray me. Because that's what love looks like. It doesn't look like feeling good about everyone. It doesn't look like feeling anything. It looks like choosing to behave in certain actions that honor and care for the people around you, because that's what Jesus did. And Jesus says, you'll be blessed if you do the same. Was Jesus saying literally that we need to go wash each other's feet? Thank God, no. Because I don't need that in my life. You know what I mean? Although I have been part of foot washing services. I have friends that have been part of foot washing services, and they're powerful. We don't have one planned, just to be clear. If any of you are kind of freaking out right now, there's not anything planned, okay? There's another book in the Bible. We're going to jump real quick, and you'll see why in a moment. There's a book in the Bible called 1 John. So we just read from John. John was written by John, the apostle. 1 John was written by John, the apostle, much later in his life. In fact, at this point in John's life, John was a pastor. He was an elder in a local church. We don't know what church. We don't know a lot about it, but we know that John was a pastor. And John wrote 3 letters to his church. 1 John, 2 John, and 3 John. It's pretty simple. In 1 John, John gives some instructions to his church. And as he gives these instructions, he is very abundantly clearly recalling this conversation in this moment with Jesus. Very clearly. I can't emphasize it enough. It is obvious as anything I've ever seen in the Bible that what John is writing to his people is directly coming from this conversation from John 13 to John 15. One of the things that he writes is, dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and truth. A healthy church family cannot be healthy if they don't love one another. A healthy church family must love one another. Well, what does love look like? Well, I'm actually considering doing a 15-week sermon series on that at some point in the future. Yeah, it's crazy. And if I do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk straight through 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient. What does that mean? Love is kind. What does that mean? All the way through it. I may or may not, I don't know, 15 weeks is a long time. What John identifies here, what Jesus identified, a new command I give you, you'll be blessed if you do these things. What Jesus identified, what John is now riffing on, is that central to the idea of love in the Jesus ethos is that love is action. Love is what you do. It is not what you say. It is not what you feel. It is not what you think. It is what you do. And divorced from action, love cannot be present. So, a church can't be healthy if they don't love one another. A church must love one another to be healthy. Well, what does it look like? It looks like washing their feet, not your hands. The way of the world is that when someone wrongs you, when someone betrays you, when someone hurts you, when someone wounds you, when someone does something unjust to you, what do? What do? I wash my hands of them. I establish boundaries. But can I be real honest? Sometimes my boundaries are more about me just being done with the situation. Does that mean we shouldn't establish boundaries? No, absolutely, boundaries are a good thing. But sometimes what we do is just find a way to wash our hands and be done. Well, you wronged me, I'm done with you. That is not love. Because if anyone in the history of humanity deserved to wash their hands of another person, Jesus deserved to wash them of Judas. But instead, he chose to wash his feet. He chose to wash Judas' feet. He chose to wash the feet of the man who 24 hours later would kiss him on the cheek and say, this is the man you're looking for. And that would begin Jesus' road to Golgotha. Jesus washed his feet. What does it look like to be a healthy church? The foundation, the starting point, the only starting point is we must love one another. What does love look like? It looks like when you are wronged, when you are hurt, when you are wounded, when someone says something to you that just, when someone does something to you that feels like they blew you off, because someone in our church is going to hurt you at some point because we're people. I might hurt you at some point. It will never be because I intend to. But sometimes I'm kind of dumb. Sometimes I say things that I don't really know what I'm saying. I'm also fun because of that, for what it's worth. But sometimes that fun isn't so fun. I might tell you I'm going to do something and I forget, because I forget lots. I might wound you. Someone else might wound you. And in that moment, you have a decision to make. Will I wash my hands or will I wash their feet? In a healthy church, the decision must always be, I will wash their feet. I will wash their feet because they are my brother, because they are my sister, because they are God's child. They are not different than me. I try to put this into practice in my life because Lord knows I've needed people to wash my feet plenty of times when they should have washed their hands of me. I've needed the grace that I now try to give. And we're going to have to figure out how to do that with one another. Because a healthy church must love one another. Now, over the next 10 weeks, we're going to talk about a whole bunch more characteristics, a whole bunch more behaviors, and I think it's going to be an incredible journey. I'm as excited about this as anything that I've ever done. But love is what glues it all together. Because Jesus Christ left the throne of heaven because of his love for us. He died on a cross because of his love for us. And he modeled that love in these moments when he washed the feet of the one who would betray him. So if we're going to be a healthy church family, we must wash one another's feet, not our own hands. And as we do, God will begin to do things in our midst that we can't even fathom today. And I'm personally pretty excited for that road. So join me over the next 10 as we look at this, and we're going to figure out what it looks like to be healthy together. But within all of it, above all, put on love, which binds it all together in perfect unity. Let me pray for us.